Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on the key benefits of decoupled architecture in e-commerce, brought to you by the one and only Acro Media. Hi, I'm Greg. I am our Director of Sales here at Acro Media, and I am going to be your host today, alongside my co-host, Jace, who is our Director of Accounts. Together, we're here to dive into the fascinating world of decoupled architecture and how we see it revolutionizing the e-commerce landscape. So today, whether you're a business owner, a developer, or if you're just someone who's curious about the latest trends in e-commerce, you're in for a treat today. So yeah, get ready to explore our game-changing advantages of decoupled architecture and how we see it transforming your online business. Yeah, I think we can just jump right in. Jace, awesome. You got the first slide queued up. Yeah, let's
Perfect.
get right in.
Yeah, you got all the buzzwords in that one, so I'll just try and keep it pretty bare bones. We'll start with kind of the challenges we've seen from monolithic platforms. Obviously, they are a good fit for some companies, but some of the troubles B2B businesses are encountering on monolithic platforms, the first being the lack of scalability. We've found that monolithic platforms can often struggle to handle large-scale growth or sudden changes in demand. When companies are trying to add new features, it can be complex and time-consuming, leading at the end of the day to a slower delivery of those new solutions to their customers, to their internal teams, and to any other stakeholders involved. And speaking of teams, like scalability also includes the onboarding and adding of new teammates or whole teams, which can get challenging due to the lack of boundaries between the services. And I know we'll touch on testing later, but I mean, that is also wrapped up in that whole thing as well.
Absolutely. And I think another kind of key shortcoming as well, with sticking with what we call a monolithic setup, would be the performance limitations that are included in that kind of a structure. Again, looking at what we consider kind of a traditional monolithic site, you can scale. You can scale that service. However, you're essentially scaling the entire service. And we've seen that there is always going to be a point of diminishing returns where you've kind of grown beyond those bounds. And ultimately, we see those situations running into problems. And it's not as scalable as one might indicate or believe.
100%, Greg. And just to build on that, like what we've found is this monolithic architecture is great for small applications or businesses because at that size, you can actually scale it quite rapidly through development, through testing, debugging, and sometimes even cost. However, when the system grows, when your business grows, that's where the pros become cons, as then it becomes more of an obstacle for businesses, and they should really start to look to evolve into another form, which we're going to talk about here.
I think we don't have it as a bullet point here, but that does remind me, I think it's worth mentioning the slow speed of development, or as a lot of people would call it, the increased time to market for new features in a kind of a traditional setup. Traditional setups, even when you're doing any kind of small changes to source code, it gets pushed through what is called a CI pipeline. And there's a lot of waiting for a pipeline to succeed. And that happens with every change that every team member makes. So if one team member is waiting for the pipeline to run, essentially that is carried across the whole team. And you can really see how that challenge or that slowdown in development can become really compounded quite quickly across a bunch of other team members. So yeah, I think it's worth mentioning that speed of development is a big factor. I think we had another slide here. Just to note, a little bit of a case study here. We had one of our long-term clients that was really feeling the pains of having larger teams. They had a traditional technology stack that we'd actually developed with them previously. And being based in the telecom industry, they really had a lot of emphasis and push to keep up to date on tech, which was considered to be very key for their success. We worked with them, and after kind of identifying the gaps in their tech stack, make it a plan for transitioning from that legacy monolithic system to a more modern decoupled architecture became a big focus for them. And we worked alongside them to make sure that that change was smooth, it was streamlined, and really made that dream a reality. Where we kind of supported them there was we drew a lot from our extensive experience in web development in general through e-commerce. And we provided them with real comprehensive thought leadership to help guide them through that adoption of that new technology. We're really pushing them towards what we'd call microservice-based architecture. And that was a bit of a big departure from what they'd done previously. So we came in, we offered some best practice insights. We helped them with their architectural design principles and put a lot of consideration in how this could scale so that we can ensure that their technology stack would be flexible, scalable, and aligned with their long-term goals. What we wanted to avoid was a situation where they kind of tip over into a whole different technology stack, and they find themselves 2, 3, 4 years down the road with the same issue they have right now, where they have to switch technologies. And the goal here was really to provide some longevity for the systems we were putting in place. I think this new architecture did bring a pretty wide range of benefits. We were finding that launches were much smoother. Our development with our team and their teams was very much streamlined. Development processes were a lot quicker. And I think ultimately where they saw that the biggest benefit was we had a much shorter timeline for doing launches and development of new features and even a whole new projects. We actually found, in fact, that this new technologies that we put in place, they found so advantageous that they've fully embraced it across all of their streams of their businesses. They've actually been putting a lot of effort towards establishing development standards that are kind of in line with what we put forward with them. And really what they're trying to aim for is to have kind of consistent methodologies across all their development teams. May it be our team, vendors like us, other vendors, or even their internal teams that work within their ecosystems. And what we've really seen is that by establishing this level of development continuity, it's really enhanced their ability to scale, and it's really it's significantly reduced effort on a lot of processes. Things like onboarding new team members is a lot more efficient. Deploying new features, as mentioned before, is much quicker. And ultimately, bigger pieces like QA are a lot more consistent across all their platforms, where they had a lot of time savings by embracing kind of this new design system.
Perfect. Thanks, Greg. And speaking of QA, I should have done a little more QA on the headlines on this slide, but I'll move on as we move into using digital or decoupling to digitally transform a business. So what I want to talk about is how do businesses tackle digital transformation by decoupling systems? What does this look like? What I found is it starts with separating all the systems so they become independently manageable. And that really is the foundation of decoupling, is the kind of the first step towards heading towards a full microservice architecture. But decoupling as a first step provides a number of inherent benefits. So for example, in the manufacturing business, various systems and processes involved. There's inventory management, supply chain management, production planning, quality control, and so many more, not to mention accounting and whatnot that tie into the order process. So by separating these systems into independent services or modules or components, whatever you want to call it, and whatever your vernacular in your industry is, essentially what it comes down to is each system being able to be managed and maintained separately. Like anything in its own compartment, this separation allows teams to focus on specific areas, which makes it easier to update, monitor, and troubleshoot these individual components without affecting the entire system. So in that sort of architecture, not only does it streamline those processes, as I mentioned, but it also safeguards against cascading failures should one piece get overloaded or go down.
I think also it's probably it's important to mention that when we talk about decoupling, it doesn't always mean a move into a full microservice architecture, like I mentioned in my example. It could be just decoupling commerce and content. I think when we look at customers like manufacturers, we've seen this can be a really good first step in the move to a more flexible digital product.
Actually, as a former recent account manager, it brings up a recent case in which, in working with a manufacturer in the IT hardware space, time to market was crucial. We identified the need to utilize a SaaS provider to reduce that time to market and decouple the content from the commerce to meet their content demands while also meeting their commerce demands and still hitting that time to market. Essentially, what we wanted to do is create that great foundation for them while not locking them into a vendor or a technology should they ever outgrow any part of it as they explore this new space in the D2C world.
I think one way of looking at when we're looking at the concept of decoupled systems, I think we can look at the decoupled system is essentially a component of the overall system. Now, I think probably the way to put that simply, each system is essentially becoming its own standalone component that interacts with the other components, usually through APIs. And those developments can be, or components, sorry, can be developed, executed, tested, debugged, all that kind of good stuff independently from one another. I think when we were to look at manufacturing businesses, this really means that the different areas of production process can be addressed and improved one at a time. And essentially we're in a situation where they can spread out their investment. So what I mean by that, for example, if we had something like a inventory management system, it could be developed and worked on independently from, say, a production planning system. And introducing this kind of modularity really allows for a better sense of specialization and optimization for each component. Ultimately, we find that that really leads to a better improved performance and reliability across the whole system.
100%. And kind of moving on to the last point there. And it may sound like I'm repeating Greg a little bit, but it's much in line with the previous points, is where decoupling allows for that incremental change that can transform your business one component at a time, which ends up being creating a much faster rate of change and a less expensive approach than changing a monolithic system that surrounds or encompasses the whole business. In theory, transitioning from a monolithic system to a decoupled architecture enables people or businesses such as manufacturers to embrace this, sometimes daunting transformation in more of a phased approach. We found some industries, won't have developers on staff or be unfamiliar with a lot of these technology. And it's no knock against them. Why would they? This is often a completely new space for them. So therefore, when instead of overhauling the entire system at once, they can be focused on transforming one component at a time, like the last piece I mentioned there. So this approach ends up being faster, less expensive than a monolithic system, and eases the onboarding and training onto those new systems. It's not some giant beast to tame. It's a bunch of small pieces to learn one at a time that then allows for easier adoption from employees, staff, and customers. Not only that, I find, in allowing incremental change and compartmentalized change, it allows businesses to prioritize critical areas or pain points and change those first. For example, a manufacturer or someone new to the D2C space, might start with getting their catalog online first, and then introducing a direct-to-consumer checkout, and then maybe a B2B flow, and then connect their accounting. This kind of compartmentalized or incremental growth or change really facilitates better resource allocation, reduces disruption as you're going through this change, and just provides immeasurable benefits along that journey, top to bottom, many which we'll touch on next.
Well put. Next we're going to be looking at some of the key benefits that we see of a decoupled architecture in commerce. The first one we had here was easy integrations. When it does come to integrations, again, we're going to keep saying monolithic platforms. We do find that those old traditional platforms fall pretty short. They're usually designed as what we call an all-in-one solution. So they're really aiming at providing a wide range of features within one single system. In principle, this sounds great. The challenge is that this really limits the ability of any type of business, B2B, B2C, to choose what they would consider their best of breed solutions that could address their specific needs. they're essentially bound to the solutions or the connections that are available within that all-in-one solution, which is really a very limiting factor, and essentially puts barriers in place for these businesses versus implementing flexibility where they can choose the different integrations that they want and figure out which systems are best in breed for their business and are going to work for their specific business and integrate with those systems versus the ones that they're essentially kind of forced into with that all-in-one solution.
Yeah, hit the nail on the head. And I think easy integration doesn't stop at just choosing the right solution. I also think it includes the switching costs of those integrations. As Decoupled sets up more of plug and play style architecture, businesses then are not married to a certain technology or feature set. Even once implemented, it just becomes much easier top to bottom to figure out what's best for you.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, and a bit of that giveaway from the slides we have here next, but I'll touch on the front end flexibility next. Because what we've found is decoupling is really the first step in creating a high location customer audience proof experience while all using the same backend functionality, making it easy for your team and your customers to experience that kind of conformity across platforms, across technologies. So what does this mean? What I'm referring to is the ability and desire in today's hyper-targeted world for B2B businesses to kind of replicate what a lot of B2C businesses are doing and create and manage content and website layouts that cater to different audiences with different requirements, all within their one web experience. This is challenging in conventional monolithic platforms, given the tightly coupled nature of the front-end design to the back-end system. But with decoupled architecture, which is kind of what I would say is the first step to that full microservice architecture, B2B businesses can leverage that same back-end functionality while building and managing multiple websites or front-end experiences, whether mobile or desktop, that really are tailored to their audience's specific needs or multiple audiences' unique needs.
I think that's actually probably a really good segue into our next bullet here, which would be improved user experience. So I think with improved front-end flexibility, you can improve the user experience for your clients or customers. I think, again, when we look back at monolithic platforms, historically, we see that they're really focused on either content or commerce. They're either really robust in content implementation and delivery, or they are focused on commerce. It's very rare, or probably never, that we would see a system that really does both really well. It's kind of one or the other. And having that kind of one or the other approach really is going to end up limiting the experience in one way or another. Either the commerce experience is going to be very limited, or you have a great commerce experience and content is falling pretty short. By decoupling and finding separate solutions for content and commerce, that really allows B2B and B2C businesses to create a more tailored and enhanced user experience for the customers, no matter if they're coming for commerce or they're coming for content, or if they're coming for a bit of both. It really is an improved experience for those customers.
Yeah, well phrased, Greg, and I think I'll steal that. So what we see by combining content and commerce is really a better customer experience through, providing rich, informative content, personalizing those content experiences, allows us to enhance storytelling and brand engagement. And as I mentioned previously, it supports cross-channel consistency. These are all components which allow B2B businesses to offer those immersive customer experiences. And we've found having the ability to do these things elevates the overall user experience. It fosters engagement. It boosts conversions. We're not making any promises. But at the end of the day, what it does is strengthen customer loyalty through that consistency across those channels.
Next, we're going to look at a bit of a kind of an abbreviated case study where we saw a decoupled architecture as a solution really benefited the project. This was a recent project we had where a client came to Acro Media after they had a failed project where the tight deadlines and really massive amounts of planning and development that they had just proved too much for other agencies. So they were really looking for a company that could match those exhaustive needs. They had a kind of a time window for proof of concept, and a lot of time was wasted up front with the previous vendor. So they were now on an even more tight timeline, and it was running out. They were under a lot of pressure, and ultimately they needed a partner that could prove that we could deliver on an accelerated development process and be able to repeat that process as well into the future. With Acro Media, they did find a partner that had a streamlined agile web development process. And we proved that we could create a repeatable, iterative experience that would drive projects forward quickly and allow them to have a lot of feedback in that iterative process. They did have a very ambitious timeline. They wanted to have an MVP completed within essentially 85 days of initially speaking to us. That actually included 2 websites. So pretty big ask. And I do feel that by using a decoupled approach to this development and utilizing our internal accelerator, our agile processes, and of course our strong team members, we were able to hit their timeline. And I do feel that had we not taken a decoupled architecture and we had followed a more traditional monolithic development plan, I am very confident that we would have not hit that time frame. If anything, it probably could have been twice that long. So it was a really good opportunity to prove the value and the power of a decoupled architecture. And the client was very happy, and we are continuing along with an agile project with them right now, and it's continuing to prove to be very quick, efficient, and they're very happy with this idea of time to value and time to market, and making that a big emphasis on the project.
Yeah, great example, Greg. I think we even have a little case study in the resources section of our website. If you want more information on this particular case study, I'll just do a little plug for that. I think marketing will appreciate that. So I will go forward in the slide just to go back. I'll touch on next the improved speed and usability here. So by decoupling these complex routines, particularly from the customer-facing end, it reduces the loading of core systems, most commonly resulting in a faster digital environment and smoother UX. We've mentioned it time and time again, but decoupling these services and enabling distributed operations across your different components, overall performance is bound to improve. Services can be optimized individually for specific tasks, resulting in faster response times and a smoother UX. Now, I'm not technical, but I do have a note for this one as well. So I'll look at my notes here and let me get this right. I've also been told it allows for the implementation of caching mechanisms at the service level, which help reduce redundant computation and database queries, vastly improving performance. Now, that's from one of our technical SMEs. That's way over my head, performance talking, but I do know with improved performance, it also helps your SEO as well.
Absolutely. Well, it sounded impressive, Jace, for sure.
Appreciate
Even
it.
if it wasn't your words. I guess kind of the last bullet here over to me, scalability. I think when we look at scalability, a decoupled e-commerce engine allows you to scale significantly faster with less risk, typically resulting in a faster time to market. I mentioned that previously on that last case study, and lower entry costs for things like spinning up a new brand or new languages, or anytime you step into kind of a multi-site situation. Using decoupled architectures really allows for the independent scaling of each component or service. So what this means in broad terms is that the areas of the site that experience heavier loads, so let's look at a catalog, a checkout, for example, they can be scaled independently when they're experiencing higher than normal loads. Say there's a sale going on or something like that, we can scale that piece of the site independently to the rest of it. This really enhances the user experience and reduces response times for customers. We don't need to scale the whole environment as a whole when we're leading up to things like sales. Again, it can kind of scale independently one of another. An area like a blog maybe isn't getting hit too hard during a sale. So there'd be no real need to scale that up and have the associated costs with scaling up sections of the site that really aren't going to need to have kind of that added horsepower during peak times.
And, it's not alluded to here in our bullet points, but I think I'll add sixth point. And that is non-technical independence. In some scenarios with some technologies, our accelerator, decoupling allows for marketing, sales, and the customer service teams to work independently and gives some independence to not rely on the development team to handle all these changes. It gives the marketing, sales, customer, client-facing teams some functions from the development team, switches them over to allow them to make those changes. This enables businesses, B2B or otherwise, it enables these teams to work independently, respond quickly to market changes, personalize experiences, optimize strategies, and improve collaboration through those teams. There's a ton of benefits when it comes down to this, but that autonomy and agility contribute more to effective and efficient operations, lighten the load on your development team, and ultimately lead to that improved customer experience and hopefully business growth as well.
Geez, I think maybe before we wrap up, both you and I've mentioned this idea of our accelerator. It's something we brought up in a few of our pieces here. So it's our internal tool that we've developed. It's named Gesso. It's one of the key pieces that really helped us meet that tight timeline that I'd mentioned. I don't want to take too much of the thunder away here. I would just say keep an eye out for a video in the near future. We will dive much deeper into the benefits of that accelerator itself. I maybe will just mention a couple of the key ones that really resonated with me. I think one of the things we mentioned earlier in this presentation was this concept of easy integrations. We've developed a standardized API framework with our accelerator. And one of the areas we found vast improvement in time and effort is developing new integrations. At the moment, we're seeing about a 50% decrease in development time compared with kind of the previous conventional integrations. So that's, to me, a big benefit. And I think the one that's resonated with the sales team and definitely our marketing team is the support for content and layout changes to both content and commerce pages by non-technical team members. So the idea here is hopefully gone are the days of needing to bring in front-end developers to make changes to React front ends and stuff like that. We can kind of do that all under one roof, where again, non-technical team members can actually change the layout on the site and make it look very, very rich and how they like to display it. But I won't dive too deep into that. Again, we will have a second webinar specifically around Gesso, but I did just want to mention it since we kept mentioning accelerator. I don't want anyone kind of left in the dark with what we're talking about.
Yeah, talk about steel and thunder. Well, yeah. I'll try and wrap it up now before you give too much away. So in summary, by moving away from monolithic platforms and embracing this decoupled architecture that we've been talking about, we believe businesses can overcome the limitations of scalability, slow development speed, performance issues. This approach of decoupling allows for independent management, better specialization, and better optimization of each unique component throughout your site. At the end of the day, resulting in that improved operational efficiency, reduced risk of failures, and a greater customer experience top to bottom.
That is a great summary. I think we're ready to wrap up. I'd say thank you to everyone for joining us today in exploring the benefits of decoupled architecture and e-commerce. We both hope that this webinar did provide some value to everyone today. I think in closing, I'm going to wrap up today's summary with today's webinar with a bit of a summary around why is Acro Media. I wouldn't be a salesperson if I didn't try to pitch us a little bit. I'll just mention that working with Acro Media as a web development partner, we feel offers a lot of unique advantages. Our experience in decoupled architecture does allow us to guide businesses through the adoption, providing thought leadership, design principles, scalability considerations, and streamlined processes, kind of all the things we touched on today. And I do feel that Acro Media is kind of the go-to web development company for all things e-commerce. We provide the expertise, solutions, and support you need to thrive in your markets. I would just say if this resonated with you and you'd like to explore decoupled architecture with us, feel free to reach out, and we're here to help builds your business to new heights. I would say thank you again for joining today's webinar. Looking forward to working with you guys in the future. And if anyone would like to revisit this webinar, we will be posting a YouTube link in the coming days, or if you'd like to distribute with any of your friends, colleagues, anything like that. So thanks again, and we appreciate you all attending.
Thanks.